Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. I am your host, Chris George Zuger, and you have entered the Den of Lore. Let me get the camera on and welcome you all into the show. Grab your glass of scotch, pull your chair up to the fire because we're raring to learn some cool shit tonight. And if you like the show and want to support independent broadcasting, support us at patreon.com/Den of Lore. And for as little as $1 a month, you can ensure that this show stays free of obnoxious ads besides this one. And, from random companies trying to sell you things like VPN services or website building services, unless it's actually me selling you website building services. Anyway, tons of perks to the show, such as a shout out at the top of the program. And this week I'd like to thank Pat from Brooklyn, our den mother Ellen, Mrs. Fox, Joshua Maddock, Sharon Stewart, and Shafa. I do apologize if last week was a little bit wonky. I've been battling a cold. My daughter had her first week in daycare. Well, I'm going to say first day in daycare. She spent 3 hours there, came home with the cold, and gave it to everybody. Myself, my wife, my parents, the dog. Absolutely horrible. People told me this day would come, and I didn't believe them. Well, I guess that's what I get. So make sure you stock up on cold FX and all that goodness and lots of vitamin C. Anyway, tonight on the program, I have an interesting gentleman whom I actually just met. And as you know, one of the fun things about this show is just going in live and meeting new people and talking to them. And, we may have some disagreements, but we end up always becoming friends at the end of it, for the most part. I guess. Well, he seems like a very nice guy. I've got Dr. David Miano, Ph.D., also known as the Hipster historian. You can check him out. All the links are in the show notes on YouTube. I'll post that to Facebook channels afterwards. David is an ancient historian, and no, that is not a reference to his age. He's a young guy, specializing in... the music's actually going out on its own this time. Specializing in the histories of the Near East, Egypt, Greece, San Diego. Not San Diego. He's been to San Diego, Egypt, Greece, Rome, India, and China. He has earned his Ph.D. at the University of California in San Diego. He is the author of How to Know Stuff, a little ebook designed for the general public, and several anthologies designed for classroom use, which has included The Ideas in the Making, a sourcebook for world intellectual history to 1300, and Pen Stylus and Chisel, an ancient Egyptian sourcebook. So we actually have somebody who knows something about ancient Egypt here, which, we're going to be talking about some other things in addition to that. He is currently teaching at the State College of Florida, in Manatee-Sarasota. So if I pronounce that, any of our Floridian listeners, you can tweet at me and say you pronounced that wrong if I did. Previously, he has taught at the University of California at San Diego and the San Diego Mesa College. In 2009, he received the Revelle College Outstanding Faculty Award in recognition for his excellence in teaching and continues his efforts to improve. And additionally, he is the author, a founder, and executive director of Schola Antiquorum. And he'll be able to pronounce this properly. A national non-for-profit academic society dedicated to the study of ancient history. Dr. Miano, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's my pleasure. I'm just going to readjust your screen here, just so there we go. Let me. Okay, what have to? That's the one thing I probably should have done. There we go. Now everyone can see you. Fantastic. It's normally I have the thing blown up because everyone sits so far back from the screen.
I'm not too close.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Your hair is much better than mine as well, so I'm a little bit jealous, but that's okay. Now you are actually a referral from a mutual friend of ours, Bernie Taylor, and he said man, you got to get him on the show. David's amazing. You got to get him on the show. I'm like, okay, Bernie, I'll talk to him. And I was very surprised that you contacted me back because, well, I'm kind of known as a shit disturber in academia and a shit disturber in non-academic circles. Pretty much everyone doesn't like me, so I've had to delve into different areas, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to have you here. We've learned a little bit about your past from your amazing bio, and I didn't do the voice this time just because the throat. Sorry, guys. It's either that or I start sneezing. Um, but how, like, you're an ancient history guy. How did you get into this?
I actually I switched majors a few times in college before I settled onto it. I started with computer science. I didn't like it. I went into communications and media arts. I wanted to do film, and uh, and then I switched that, and so I went into history. And I was thinking just regular, everyday, maybe European history or something like that. And then while I was taking classes, I was like, I just love the older stuff. The older, the better. And so I just got really interested in ancient history, and decided that's what I wanted to do. So it's just, I guess, because it's so long ago, it just seems more foreign. We know less about it. There's a lot of mysterious aspects to it. So I guess that's why I was drawn to it. I think that's why a lot of people are interested in ancient history. Um, with more recent history, you kind of, we've got all the documentation. We kind of know what happened. There's not really a lot of room for guessing or speculation, just refinement. So, but documentation for the ancient world is very scarce.
So, like, is there like a seminal uh, book that you had started out with? For me, it was Velikovsky's World in Collision. Yes, I know that's the 50th time I've said it, people, but and I know that it can see a little on the strange side. But like, were you into the more esoteric parts of alternate research when you were younger?
No, I never was into that. I It's funny, like when I came into ancient history, it was not until I actually made the decision to do so that I really knew much of anything about it. And I found, and this is part of the requirements of getting a degree, is I was mostly interested in reading the stuff that was written in ancient times. So yeah, we have, there are books written by scholars that you have to read and so forth and all of that, but I love the primary sources. Just going back and reading translations of all the ancient works that we had. And I have a ton of those on my bookshelf even now. I'd love to go back to them. But yeah, but I mean, as far as like, were there any books that like, oh, I read this book and it just made me interested in ancient history? Um, Not any one particular that I can think of. Um, I mean, obviously, I love books. You can see some of the background there, but there wasn't like a catalyst, if that's what you're asking.
And like your school, you said that you were in media, filmmaking, or filmmaking, communications. You sound kind of like my history going through school, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go into computer engineering technology, and then it's like, crap, okay, I'm gonna go into business administration. This isn't good, crap. Then I finally actually went through advertising. So it's like you took the same or very similar journey, and I can understand where you're coming from, because it's like, well, what interests me? What is it I can do with my life, and how is it I can contribute to society? You just took it that extra step where I probably should have gone that route.
Yeah,
No, no.
yeah, and now it's interesting because I've never lost interest in the media. So like now, I just started up a YouTube channel
Hmm.
over the summer. I can marry my two interests. I can take the history, marry it with the filmmaking part of my interest, and try to do something that combines the two. So that's been fun.
No, the YouTube channel, the link is in the YouTube notes, and I'll make sure that it's, again, that it is actually transferred to the Facebook page afterwards, so everyone can go check it out. You've been doing about a video a week, and you said it
Yeah,
was on during the summer. So like, what's the main focus of that particular channel?
I do two different series, and I alternate each week between the two. So one is it's basically a travel series. I'm planning on going on a trip every 6 months, and I just finished one at the beginning of the summer. I went to England and I visited all of the Roman ruins, and I went to Stonehenge and just hopped from place to place. I rented a car, and just my friend and I just drove around the country, and we visited all these sites, and I just took video of the whole thing. And then I did some teaching at the various sites, and I talk about the various things that are there. And so I'm turning that into a travel series. So There's going to be about a dozen episodes of that. Every other week it comes out, and that's called the Antiquities Travel Guide. And then the other weeks, I do Myths of Ancient History, and that's just like a video essay format where I basically look for very popular ancient history YouTube videos that I feel get the history wrong, and I basically it's a debunking video, So I'll find something. Oh, look at it, it's got hundreds of thousands of views, or maybe even millions of views, and then talk about what's wrong with it. And I try to do it in a way that's not, some people like to do debunking videos and they're just like totally trashing their opponents and all that. I try to be as polite as I can.
Yeah, I understand your perspective on that. I may have taken the alternate, the alternate. But
people love it when people are mean, I guess.
Well, yeah, negativity sells, and it's like, okay, well, I can be negative. If somebody's just being a real jackass about stuff, it's like, okay, well, this is obviously bunk, or this is completely insane. I just have a very low threshold for bullshit nowadays. And but again, you get to being an academic, you're taken seriously more if you have I'm gonna say more of an even-keeled, open-minded / articulate approach to things.
Yeah, I think I like to keep the lines of communication open. Like, so who's my audience? Who's my target audience? I could just target other fellow academics who like hearing me trash other people who are wrong, but that's not really what I want to do. I want to gain the interest of people who are interested in the subject, who don't really know, they see this, they see that, they're not sure what to believe or whatever, or even try to convert some of the people who are, already believers in some of the things I'm debunking. I think that it's good to reach out and befriend these people. So I actually, I don't have an issue with forming friendships and having relationships with people that I disagree with, and even people whose opinions I might find rather far-fetched. But I think conversation, communication, it's all a good thing.
Well, and I'm trying to keep a more I'm gonna say softer approach to things. So there's inviting people on the show that I may disagree with is kind of a big thing for me now. And obviously, I forget, it was a couple weeks back we had somebody on whom, it's like, no, I disagree with you on this point, this point, and this point, and then we're talking along something else, and we're both like, yeah, no, on this thing we're 100% in agreement. So you never know common ground and where you're gonna get it, but. At least, okay, I'm gonna state my point out on this, is that I believe there is a possibility that there was some type of, at least a people, a group, an organization, a society that may have contributed to legends, and it may have visited different parts of the planet, 13,000 years ago. I'm not going to call it necessarily Atlantis. I'm not going to say that they had spaceships or, crystal laser beams, but I'm saying that it's at least a possibility. And I know that for an academic, when you say that there's at least a possibility, you're moving, they say you're moving the goalposts. If that possibility is open, then, well, shit, it's a possibility that I could wake up with a gold toilet tomorrow. Probably not going to happen. Now, I'm going to at least get kind of the ball rolling and say, okay, well, from starting from that, we'll start with the earliest part of time, as it were. Starting with the Atlantis mythos, what is your position on it, and how did you come to this determination?
With Atlantis, first of all, as a historian, I deal more with the documents than I do with the archaeology. So the first thing I do is I go to the source. Who's the first one that wrote about Atlantis? Plato. Well, let's look at Plato's works and so forth. I actually learned a lot about Plato even before I started researching Atlantis or anything like that. But and this is one of the things I bring out on my channel, is that the type of writer Plato was. What is he trying to do? The problem I have with some people who are big proponents of the Atlantis theory is that they take it as if he is somehow writing a history book that he's presenting to everyone and saying, this is what happened. And that's really not what his books are about. First of all, they're philosophy books, but the format of these philosophy books are in the form of a dialogue where he has characters. Basically, you're reading like a little play that Plato wrote, and one character says this, and then another character says that. And it turns out that it's just one of his characters that starts talking about Atlantis, a fellow by the name of Critias, in his book, The Critias, and also in his book, The Timaeus. And it's just Critias who's talking about Atlantis, not Plato. I mean, yeah, Plato wrote it, but we have to take that into consideration instead of just taking it as if Plato saying, "Hey, everybody, Atlantis," and he wasn't.
Now, what about? And again, obviously, you've you're dealing with the source text and the translations. What about the dates matching up with the potential for a cataclysm or even just the end of the Younger Dryas period?
Well, I think it's basically coincidence, because it roughly does. It doesn't exactly. It roughly does. And there is a tendency in a lot of ancient works from all different cultures around the world to various countries, various peoples loved to lengthen their ages, like to make themselves as old as they possibly could be. Because if you were an older society, you were somehow superior. Like, well, we've been around longer than you have. And so a lot of these societies would invent histories of making themselves go way, way back just so they could be older than the next one. And you see this because you will even find people revising their histories and adding on centuries to their history to make themselves even older than they were before. You know, Rome's a good example where they, Rome's history was relatively short compared to everybody else, and they start adding on all this material like, oh, we were way back when the Trojan War was occurring, we were around, and they tried making up the stuff about Aeneas coming to Italy and founding Rome and all of that just to give themselves age. We even found it with the Jews in the Bible when they used to live in Egypt during the Greek period. They began changing the years and the dates in the Bible to make themselves older than Egypt, dates which in the original of the Bible were shorter. So same thing with Plato. Well, the character Critias in Plato talking about how Athens is 9,000 years old at the time of writing. Athens was not that old. We know Athens wasn't that old because we've done the archaeology in Athens. It doesn't go that far back. They're just trying to make themselves older.
And how does this tie into the texts of Edfu, where there are specific mentions of antediluvian time, which very closely match what was written in Plato's works, that at least will lead to the idea that there was some type of pre-civilization, that if you're talking about gods, a lot of the times this may not have been necessarily in the literal sense. You're dealing with people who may have been either more advanced, not necessarily technologically, but societally, that came and taught people how to be able to do things such as either work with stone or agriculture or irrigation. And this type of people coming from the sea, people coming from far off lands, is echoed in pre-Columbian civilization, Mayan civilization, in the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and it's all very, very similar.
Yeah. Well, 2 points. First, on the temple that is mentioned in Plato's Critias, we can't verify that it existed or even that there was writing on it. And also in Plato's story, it doesn't actually say that the information was written or copied exactly off of the temple. So we can't verify that. There's nothing older than Plato. We just have a character in Plato saying that there was a temple and that there was a priest who relates this information to the fellow Solon. But it's just the story, so we can't corroborate it. even to the more important point that you brought up, um, this is an idea that's been popular, especially since the 60s and 70s. The idea that basically the gods in mythology were not actually gods. In real life, they were visitors or some kind of advanced people that the primitive peoples just assumed to be gods, right? And trying to make it historical. In other words, those mythologies, they are real. They're just garbled versions of the reality, right? That there were real people, and of course it's been done to death with sci-fi and all that. I can even remember there's an old original series Star Trek where they meet the god Apollo and he's on another planet, but he had visited Earth and he had inspired the Greek myths. He and his fellow gods and so forth. And of course you get it with later stuff like Stargate and all that. But um, this is actually interpretation. There was a Greek philosopher, but not a philosopher, a Greek historian, I guess you could say, by the name of Euhemerus. He lived in the 4th century BCE, and uh, this is right after Alexander the Great, and he wrote a book called The Sacred History, and his interpretation was that the gods were real people and just were misinterpreted to be gods. And this is just that idea kind of refurbished for the modern era. I'm I'm a little skeptical of that. And the reason is because we know people make up stories and we know people make up characters. And to just assume automatically without any other evidence that it's all true, I think is being a little bit too credulous. Like there's no such thing as fiction. Like fiction doesn't exist. It's all true. I think I think that's just a little too credulous. That's my opinion anyway. Does that make sense?
Well, you're
What I'm
essentially,
trying to
well, from your perspective, essentially what you're saying is if somebody, 2,000 years ago reads a Superman comic and assumes that, oh, well, maybe this was, tales of their hero whom could, they thought could fly through the sky or what have you, and then somebody applying their societal bias, or perspective to that particular story to try and make sense of it to them. And I can concede that point, that it is a possibility, but it's like, to me, if you have, um like, if you have a group of people that are separated by large bodies of water that have not only, um, similar stories, and origins, but it seems to be that the myth of cataclysms seems to be similar, such as a great flood, such as destruction by fire. This complete reshaping of the world, that it has to have come from somewhere. Like, even when it comes to, and I know that this is going to be a bad example, but if you have stories that are passed down either through, word of mouth, or not word of mouth, but through oral tradition, we'll say, such as, the flood myth in Sumer with, Gilgamesh, which pretty well spot on when if you translate that to the tale of Noah. Very similar, almost one to one story. Obviously, some details are changed, the names are changed, the moral stories change, but the basis is the same. Even and that area where it came from, the story could have been separated by thousands, and it was separated by thousands of years. But if that tradition or that story is being passed on, those similarities are going to exist. If you have those similar stories, but we're talking about a world apart, where most people are saying that there's no way that these stories could have gotten from, let's say, the west coast of South America to, to ancient Egypt. If there are similar mythologies, is that just a coincidence? If it's only two societies, is it one coincidence? If we're talking about hundreds with the same essential story, is it coincidence?
Well, we'll get to the flood in a second, but uh, I think in general, the similarities between the various countries' stories is somewhat exaggerated. Um, there aren't really that many stories that are, I mean, extremely similar. You know what I'm saying? They might have, oh, they have a natural disaster and they have an earthquake, we have an earthquake. Isn't that amazing? No, because earthquakes happen all over the world. You know what I'm saying? Um, so I think a lot of people really exaggerate similarities. Now, with regard to the flood, I think that's probably the best example. Yes, you do have some really amazing similarities between the flood legends of various countries, but the ones that are the most similar are the ones of the people who live close to each other. Like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Israel, all of these countries in that area, that's where the flood stories are the most similar. When you go outside of that, you go to like China, their flood legends are not anything like the flood legends of the Middle East. So I think, yes, okay, they have a flood legend way over here and they have a flood legend way over there, but it isn't really the same flood legend. You know what I'm saying? So to make what I'm saying brief, I just think that a lot of the similarities have been over magnified.
And to you, what has been one of, besides the Atlantis myth? Because I know we're talking Atlantis, and I kind of it's a big thing for me. It's been kind of one of the sticking points where the story hasn't really gone away, and I know that there are people who've mythologized it and made esotericism out of it, and they'll talk about crystals and healing and sunken ruins where spaceships are still coming out of it. I don't believe that stuff because it's like there's no real proof. It's just the same stories regurgitated on the same two or three websites like Bibliotheca Pleiades, which is just this like I've seen better fiction out of Brandon Sanderson. If I want to read fantasy, read Brandon Sanderson. That's some good stuff. But the far off there ancient alien stuff, it's like, yeah, sure, like, man, it's possible, but it's not very probable to me because there's no real proof, and also because, again, if it's appearing on History Channel, chances are, well, it's being used for ratings and not for historical fact. Like what has been the big thing besides Atlantis that you have that's been your, I'm gonna say, hill to die on? What is your big to do?
You mean like a specific legend
Well, I'm
that
gonna
I'm
well, you're debunking things. So
yeah.
if there is a particular pop culture reference
Oh, I
to
see.
a history or mythology that has been romanticized and beaten like a dead horse on YouTube by you know goodness knows who, bright insight. What is kind of your big subject that at the end of the day you're like, come hell or high water, you're getting your voice of opinion out to say, no, that is BS. This is why I think it's BS, and you're crazy for thinking it.
Yeah, I guess I have a number of those, and I go through them one by one. But the one that I'm on a big kick on right now, anyway, is on the Great Pyramid of Giza, which, I mean, there's so much that has been written about it, and so many really off the wall theories. But what really gets my goat is when I hear people making really um, strong false statements about the pyramids, like, oh, uh, there never has been a mummy found in the pyramid. There's no evidence within the pyramids that they were ever used as tombs. Um, uh, what else? Oh, the mathematic like the pyramids were built so mathematically precise that they're almost perfect. There's there's a lot of statements like that about the pyramids that just aren't true. Um, so those kind of get my goat. Um, like, oh, did you know that? I mean, this is true, but it still irritates me because people will say, did you know that in the Great Pyramid, okay, there was absolutely no treasures found like in the other tombs, and no hieroglyphics like found in the other tombs, and all of this. And then you say to yourself, wait a minute, all of the tombs, even in the Valley of the Kings, they all were empty. Every single tomb has been empty. It's only King Tut's tomb that anything was found in it, and that's because it was buried underneath another tomb. Um, so the very fact that the tomb has been robbed is being used as evidence that it wasn't a tomb, and that kind of irritates me.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
as far as the Great Pyramid, there is an extensive. At least I'm going to say there are inscriptions, and I forget exactly which pharaoh had done it. They had actually gone into the tomb and removed the treasures that were in there, and they actually had it inscribed on a temple wall that that described the treasures that were inside being taken out of it by a future king. Um, it didn't say anything about it being a tomb, though. I know that within the Great Pyramid there are no inscriptions, except for the one cartouche, which is like in one of the.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, no,
the,
there aren't. Well, there aren't in the fourth dynasty. All the fourth dynasty pyramids, Snefru's three pyramids, the three pyramids of Giza, they have nothing written on the walls. It's not until you get to the fifth dynasty that the pyramids start having writing on the walls. It just wasn't their custom as of yet, Although there are some things on the walls of the step pyramid of Djoser from the third dynasty. It's just that the trend didn't really catch on after that, so you don't find the pyramid text until you get to the fifth dynasty. But yeah, there was some graffiti in the Great Pyramid that had King Khufu's name on it.
I know that there are some. There is some historical, well, at least as far as like mainstream academia. Well, they're going to say, okay, well, because of this one piece of graffiti that obviously we're going to attribute it to that specific pharaoh. Although that's the only thing they have to attribute it to that pharaoh. Is that?
That's not the only thing. There is one other thing. Well, actually, there's of course the later stories, like Herodotus the Greek says it's for that king. But we have the Diary of Merer, which is a papyrus document that was found. It's a log book that was created by this Merer, who was an overseer of construction projects. And he talks in it about them bringing limestone blocks down the Nile on boats for building the Akhet Khufu. And the Akhet Khufu, in maybe from a few centuries later, the Egyptians identified the Akhet Khufu as the Great Pyramid. So here they're talking about building the Great Pyramid, and it's named after Khufu, right? Akhet means horizon of Khufu, which is talking about the place he goes in the afterlife. So that's pretty good evidence, that that's what it was for even back then. Not to mention the fact that it's right in the middle of a cemetery. Like there's a cemetery all around it, and there are tombs like all around the pyramids of Giza. And even near Menkauri's pyramid, the third smaller pyramid, there was a mummy found of one of Menkauri's wives in one of the smaller tombs right next to it. So,
but it wasn't actually in the pyramid.
No, but there was a mummy found in the pyramid of Merenre I from the fifth dynasty, and there have been parts of mummies found in pyramids, like the step pyramid of Djoser. They found like a foot, I believe, a mummified foot. But yeah, I mean.
No, again, like I know we're splitting hairs here, but this is also part of the fun part of a conversation. One mummified foot, was it wrapped in gold? Could it have been from a grave robber who got killed somehow?
I mean, we don't know.
So it's like, we don't know. Is it like, okay, so you found, like we found a mummy, but it was just its foot. Okay, who did the foot belong to? Was it there when it was built, or so those kind of misconceptions can come along. And can really mess things up when even for myself, or when academia is saying, okay, well, here's a blanket statement, and I know that from academia's side, when the alternative history side says something like, well, no, because of here's why this is a little bit fuzzy, or why we think it's wrong, and then if a blanket statement such as that is said, and oh my goodness, she's gonna knock over my cat. No, come on, yeah, come on. This is the Egyptians. They worshipped cats as gods, for a pretty good reason. She does whatever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
So,
again, but there have been sarcophagi found in the pyramids. They were empty, but we found sarcophagi. I mean, and we know they're sarcophagi because we have sarcophagi from other tombs that look like them. So, yeah, they're empty, but
Okay.
there's the big casket,
Well, if we're going to refer to the great, the possibility of the Great Pyramid in the King's Chamber, now there is no indication that that is actually a sarcophagi. It looks like a sarcophagi, but if it just because a fox kind of looks like a dog doesn't mean it's a dog. Doesn't mean it's spot and it's kind of come over and when I call it.
Just because it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck doesn't mean it's a duck.
Well, okay. Well, there's no lid on it. There's no inscriptions for it. And
I know.
So
Yes.
if we're going with the idea that okay, well, if this is a sarcophagi and we found similar sarcophagi or similar things with lids, that are made out of granite that have held bodies, or if we've not found any bodies in it, but we're assuming, if we really what? No. Okay, you go over here. Go. Sorry, she's the mascot of the show. If you've watched a couple of episodes, you understand at this point. She broke into the studio. She knows how to open the door. I've tried to keep her out. She just doesn't go. But isn't don't touch the camera. No, don't touch the camera. Just lay down. Isn't it this also the same size as what has been written in the Bible as the Ark of the Covenant?
Are the measurements exactly the same? I don't know if the measurements are exactly the same, but I know the materials are not the same.
Well, acacia wood and gold.
I think what you're referring to, I think there's a theory that it could fit inside of it.
Yes.
Yeah, but a lot of things could fit inside of it. Well,
again,
I mean, I'm gonna say anything could fit inside of it.
Have you ever been to the Great Pyramid? I haven't been myself, but I've got friends who've been.
Oh, have I been to the Great Pyramid? No, I've not been to the Great Pyramid.
Okay.
I mean, it's on the agenda for one of my trips, but.
Well, I know some people if you want to go. So
really?
They do.
Who do the tours there?
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
Oh, I'll get you in touch with them.
Okay.
So this we make friends here on the show. Okay, the next thing I want to at least again discuss, because whenever you make one of these statements, I write down a note. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to bring up a point, and then I'm going to get your.
I'm sure there are people probably shouting at the screen right now saying no, and they want to say something, but. Yeah.
But I'm like hearing your perspective on it. So you said, okay, so the one statement you had made about the measurements being so perfect. I know that's very similar to a Graham Hancock statement where he says that okay, the pyramid is aligned to true north and off by about 1/10 of a degree, which is true, and also that it has phi and pi encoded in it, which is also true. Now, whether they knew they did it on purpose or if it was a mistake, you have to understand. You have to at least admit it's kind of interesting where the Great Pyramid itself is. I forget the exact measurements. Like it is pretty well a scale model or a scale squaring of the circle of 1/2 of the planet. So if anybody in chat wants to get me on this, or if somebody can get Randall Carlson, he'll know the exact number, but I think it's like a 72,000 to 1 scale of the diameter by phi or the diameter by pi, and I'm probably off on that myself. But like that kind of mathematics is interesting to me. Not to say but to me that's interesting.
It is interesting. Although I think you can play with numbers a lot and make things look intentional that weren't necessarily intentional. I'm not saying the Egyptians did not have pi. Maybe they did. I don't know. But what I'm saying is a lot of the mathematical, marvels of the Great Pyramid are kind of fudged. You know what I'm saying? Because if you even make just the smallest adjustments at the beginning of your equation, you can come out to very different answers at the end. And I think a lot of people have played with the numbers a little bit to kind of make it seem like it was really special. And I think that I'm no mathematician, but I think if you did speak to a mathematician, they might tell you like, oh yeah, well you could kind of make that work if you wanted to,
Okay, well, at least I'll say this, is that if we can actually get, like, I'm gonna contact somebody, like, not right now. I'm gonna contact somebody at some point, because I'd like to be able to at least get confirmation of this, because I do have a few mathematician friends, thankfully. And I'd like people to get to the bottom of this, completely unbiased. They're pure math people. They don't care about the ancient history side one way or another. And I want to actually get to the bottom of that and say, okay, is this a possibility, or we're talking about absolutely precise measurements? No, because again, they're dealing with strings to measure out things, and cubits, which isn't even an exact an exact measurement that's used.
And if you look at the way the stones are put together on the inside of the pyramid, like under the casing, a lot of it's pretty shoddy. It's not. I mean, it's impressive still. I'm not trying to play down the impressiveness of the pyramids. They're great, but they're just not perfect. You know what I'm saying? Everyone always talks about how perfect they are. They're not perfect. There are mistakes in them.
So the concept of the potential for the pyramid being a power plant is way out for you. That's not your.
Yeah, I did a recent video on it. Actually, my most recent video is on that very topic.
Oh, jeez.
Because there was a video by Universe Inside You, 14 million views it had about the Great Pyramid being a power plant, and I just couldn't resist going after that one.
Which is also funny. Like, that ticks me off from a different standpoint, because those people are actually my friends. So it's like, you took his work, and how much money did you make off of that video with 14 million views, and you didn't do shit except for put the video together? That makes me angry.
I haven't reached 1,000 subscribers yet, so I haven't made any money. But I mean, that I agree. But this is the thing. There's two reasons why I go after the big videos. Well, yes, there is you hope you get more views if you go after a video with more views, but also because they're more, the videos that I feel are spreading misinformation that get the most views are the ones that need the addressing. If nobody's watching a video, then there's no real reason to go after it. You know what I'm saying?
No, I can understand that. There was one video, and this isn't for me debunking. I'm not a debunker. I'm just anti-bullshit. I can smell it from a mile away. At least I'd like to think, because I'd like to think that there's a certain amount of ethics you have to have when you're broadcasting. If you're just out selling snake oil, then you're no better than the hucksters who were selling petroleum or mercury to people to say, oh, this is going to give you long life and regrow your hair and make your dick hard. It's not cool. And then all of a sudden the person winds up dead, and that guy's left town with the money. It ticks me off. It makes me angry. But you look at like even the UFO field. Oh, it's rife with that stuff. Like that stuff is the Wild West when it comes to, literally the Wild West when it comes to this type of work. And the only video that I've ever debunked, I would like purely debunked, would have been one video where somebody tried to claim that there were, UFOs that were flying over, like they basically had taken a video that was from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory talking about the Chandra satellites doing, and it was like a B-roll for news reports, and they took it, filmed it with their camera, as they played the video on the screen. At the bottom of the screen, it said video play, and he's like, this is a live video. No! You played a video in a video player and took a video of it with your phone and then said it was UFOs when I found the original freaking film on the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was picked up by The Sun UK like a year after I debunked it. I'm just like sitting there going like, how what is with this? Like, are people that stupid? Like, oh my God. Like, it aggravates me, so I can understand where you're coming from that 110%.
I just want to say this, because a lot of people accuse academics of keeping information from the public, right? Like we're deliberately in some kind of conspiracy to prevent true information from getting out, But that's not how academia works at all. Like, you don't go to college and then they just say, okay, all right, now this is what we're supposed to tell everybody. You know what I mean? That's not how it works. In fact, we're encouraged to come up with new and original ideas. Like, you have to publish papers, and those papers have to have new ideas nobody has thought of. And then people have to like critique them. And everyone's always critiquing each other. There's there cannot be, in the way it is structured, any type of like some authority that's telling us that we have to say this. No, we can say whatever the heck we want. I have no obligations to anyone. So there isn't some kind of big brother situation where academics are all in on this. And we're not getting like paid off. I mean, teachers do not make a lot of money. Graham Hancock makes more money than we do. He makes big money on his books. What do we get? We don't get any rewards for what we do. So there's no incentive to pull the wool over everyone's eyes.
Well, to a certain extent, I'd have to disagree with that for certain academics whom have, like, having tenure is one thing. You're basically, unless you're caught killing somebody or sleeping with a student, it's very hard to get fired.
True.
So that's the
But
whole
I mean,
idea
you
of.
still don't get. I mean, one of my professors who I studied under, he was like in his 70s, and he had been teaching, his whole life. He made a little over 100K. That's pretty good, but it isn't like rich, you
Did
know.
he write the textbooks for his course?
He wrote a lot of books. Like he was one of the respected scholars of his field, looked up to, and so forth. And I knew a lot of those types of people. Some people wrote textbooks and so forth, but they don't make a lot of money on textbooks. You know who does? The publisher. They make all the money. They give the author like 5 to 10% of the proceeds. And so you know, teachers do not get rich. They just don't. If you can sell a popular book, some of them try to do that. They'll like write a popular book, but that's not a scholarly book. And they're encouraged to do scholarly work. But if they do a popular book, maybe they can make some money off of it. I did have another professor who wrote a very popular book, and it was a bestseller. So that can happen, but it's not common in academia. It does happen though, but most academics don't have that. I mean, and for the conspiracy to work, they'd all have to be in on it, even if one spilled the beans, right? Like, what if I decided, hey, everybody, I'm going to let you know, like only one has to do that and it's out of the bag. But no one has done it because there is no conspiracy.
Oh no,
You
I
have to
can.
keep every single person quiet. It's impossible.
Oh no, I can understand that. Like it seems a little preposterous. Like even for Freemasons, it's like, oh yeah, we got all these secrets. You can Google it. You can find everything.
Yeah.
It's they're out there. It's just a matter of, okay, well, what's the major driving factor when it comes to a lot of, like, not necessarily ideas being suppressed. I could see egos playing a big part if you want certain information to get out there or not. Like, again, perfect example being To the Stars Academy. You got a lot of big money and a lot of egos and a lot of media attention around this subject matter, which, at least to me and at least to my own researches, is 100% bunk, or at least it's 99.5% bunk, based on a bunch of videos that have been mischaracterized and really, really good savvy media people whom have planted some really good stories. They're going to fight tooth and nail to keep their message in going in the same direction that they want it to, which is based on their narrative. They're going to build their narrative up. And if you know how to be able to play the media, or you know how to be able to play on, say, people's perceptions of things, you can keep things going, and if to a much larger extent. If the idea of, and I'll use one of Graham Hancock's examples. I'm going to butcher this, so please do. I do apologize, Graham. I forget his name, but the gentleman whom had came up with the theory of plate tectonics. He was absolutely slagged by his peers, and his idea was called stupid and ludicrous and what have you. And what's the reality right now? Which is plate tectonics is a real thing,
But
and
eventually,
geologies.
eventually the truth came out. I mean, they accepted it. Took a little while. I mean, there's no doubt that scholars lambaste each other. If they don't like a theory, they'll come after you. But you can always find someone to publish, and eventually everybody, believe me, everybody publishes things that maybe they'll later regret, or they change their mind about, or they knew they were wrong about. That happens all the time. In fact, that culture is encouraged among academics. Academics are encouraged to change their views as more evidence becomes available. The ones that like stick to their guns no matter what, other academics look down on them. They're like, oh, they're just prideful. They can't admit a mistake. We're actually encouraged to admit mistakes and change our views when they're proven wrong and so forth. And if we don't, that's a failing on our part.
And that's kind of, I would say that would be something that has been mischaracterized about academia from certain people within. within the alternative history field, from
Yeah.
certain people who may have a certain skin in the game, as it were. And I know from, like, even for myself, my views have changed from when I first started out in doing this, back in 2016. Has it been that long? My God. And we're actually coming up on our fourth year, I think. Although 1 year, I almost basically took almost a full year off. Almost. That's about 6 months. So, like, you know, the views have changed considerably, and I've become a lot more open-minded to the academic view. I've also been able to, I've seen the business side of things, and I know how that's run, and it's not a very nice game. Just like, when it comes to academia, when it comes to business, like, yeah, everyone's fighting for grant money, everyone's fighting for a little bit of spotlight, and if people are being looked down upon, I know from other podcasters who deal with alternative history, or dealing with UFOs, there are certain people in the community who look at it and say, like, okay, those people are talking about those Archon, reptilian aliens again. Oh yeah, well that's just absolutely ridiculous. We looked at, like, the sane of us look down on those people because it's like you're fooling people to make money. Whereas from your side, you're saying that it's a matter of, okay, well, you're too prideful to be able to admit that you're wrong, and that's kind of like human failing, I would say.
Yeah. Another thing is, I've noticed, you seem to be another example, but I've recently made friends with the fellow who runs Ancient Architects, and it's happened with him, and it's happened with other people, that people who are really interested in the subject will, as they gain more information and as they do more research, come closer to mainstream academic thinking rather than further away from it. I think that the reason why people believe in a lot of these alternative theories is not because they're dumb or they're insane or anything like that. It's just that they don't have all the information. And as they get the information, I think any honest person would be led more towards the academic consensus, because that's the real reason I think there's a difference of opinion, is because this one group of people just doesn't have all the information that they need to be able to make a sound judgment.
I would have to disagree with you on that point, because at least in my experience, there are people whom you could show them that the sky is blue and they will tell you that it's green, even if you force their head to look at the sky.
Well, I'm talking about honest people, but yeah, okay.
It's not even there's a certain amount of mentality about wanting to know things and wanting to think that you know more than the other person, or have some type of secret knowledge or insider knowledge that isn't necessarily privy to other people. And the funny part is that, like, to the large majority of society, like, they don't. Large majority of society don't give a shit that the pyramids are 10,000 years old or 2,000 years old. They care about what's going on with the Jenners and Kanye, and what's going on in Hollywood, or who just won the latest season of Survivor, and those are all valid things in terms of interest. It's a matter of interest, but it's like there is this large following, or this want to be able to belong, and maybe it's a matter of not wanting to belong, or not belonging to something, and then feeling you belong to a larger group. And I even from experience, and you could see it in more fringe belief systems or faiths, or outright cults, where the want to belong to something tends to override somebody's reason. And at that point, you have more of a fanatical view about things, and at that point, reason doesn't matter. And
I admit there's kind of an attractiveness to the idea, like, hey, we have a secret that no one else knows, and it's being kept from you, the government or whatever, or, the establishment is not telling you this, and we have the answers. I can understand how that would be attractive to people.
Well, there's it's the idea of the secret knowledge. It's the same thing for Freemasonry. When I first joined, it was a matter of, well, I'm going to learn about this Illuminati shit. Like, I want to learn how to move stuff with my mind. And it's like, no, it's a bunch of old guys just sitting around in a building going, yeah, this is how you kind of lead a better life. And it's like, wow, this is nothing like they told me in the YouTube videos, So you have that reality, not necessarily, reality doesn't necessarily coincide with one's perceptions or one's expected perceptions. And it's a matter of whether somebody's willing to open their mind and be able to accept reality or the possibility that the reality is actual reality, or whether cognitive dissonance kicks in and the mental gymnastics will happen to try and make whatever they think that their paradigm is fit within that paradigm and to keep that paradigm.
Yeah. I guess there's always going to be stubborn people who just are going to dig their heels in and not change their minds. I'm hoping, though, with my videos that there will be people who are just maybe unsure. They're on the fence, and maybe I can help them in some way.
Now, at some point, I'm going to have to say is I'm going to take a look at a few of these, and if I disagree with them, I may have to debunk.
Tell me, yeah.
Or I'll do a debunk video.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
It's like then you just do the debunk video, and then we'll grow our followers together. That's the conspiracy.
Keep the conversation going.
There you go.
Yeah. Hey, no, if you do feel like I am wrong about something, or I don't have the facts, or I misled somebody about something, yeah, publish your video about it. I encourage that.
Well, this is the most important thing about this place is to at least gain other people's perspectives on stuff. And there's been a lot of at this point I'm as I said, I'm talking to a lot of people whom I may agree with or may disagree with on a lot of things. And it's about trying to be able to find good conversation. Oh yeah, Bernie's in chat. He's like, Z's got his mojo back. I'm like, man, it kind of never really left. I'm near the bottom of an actual pint of beer here, so yeah. But we're getting close to we're at the top of the hour.
Well, thank you, Bernie, for getting me on the show.
Anytime you want to come back on, we'll talk about it, because the debate is necessary, and I think that there's been too long where we have not had friendly debate between academia and more of the alternative sides of things. And I think that the division between those perspectives is kind of hindering us more to an extent of not. And I think it's kind of, it's time for learned men to sit down and actually talk with other, learned men and women, or pineapples, or what have you.
Yeah.
Actually sit down and
academics who are like, oh, I'm not going to stoop to that level, or maybe if we ignore them, they'll just go away. I don't think that way. I think engaging in conversation is a good idea.
Well, this is kind of a good point on this, and I'll use this as kind of a parable. I was not really a big proponent, but I had bought into the carbon is good, global warming is a myth thing. And then I had one of the world's top earth scientists on the show for like a 2-part 7-hour massive episode of, okay, well, I basically said, I want you to break this shit down for me step by step so that I learn. And it came down to the point of, holy crap, maybe they actually got something, maybe there is something to this whole, climate change, carbon cycle breaking down thing, and we may all actually be screwed. And once you understand the science, you can actually sit down and you can learn from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, and and people could say like, oh, well, they just showed you the false data. Maybe it's a possibility. And if the data was wrong, then I can also, now that I have the knowledge, I can go out and do the research myself with the skills and knowledge I've learned to be able to verify and double check the information. And that's something that we're not doing as a society or as a research group, where we are not questioning the information that's given to us. Like you said, hey, here's some information based on da-da-da-da-da. And I said, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? So I double checked your information based on the information that I have to try and say, okay, maybe is there something to that argument or not? Mm-hmm. So the critical thinking is paramount. And I want to be able to thank you for your time and for, bringing that to the forefront. So it's kind of where we're going, I guess, for the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Chris. I really appreciate it, and it was a pleasure talking with you.
It's a pleasure as well. Did you want to give the last word? How can people get a hold of you?
Well, if you want to find me, I am on Twitter. My handle is Dr. David Miano. I am also on YouTube, and that's where you can find my videos. It's called World of Antiquity, so just search for World of Antiquity, and if you can spell antiquity, you'll be able to find it. Or you can even just search for my name, and I'm sure my videos will come up. So those are probably the two best places to find me.
And I'm fairly certain that if you cannot spell antiquity, you could probably Google it. And excuse me, for that cough, I'm going to see if the outro music plays. as you've watched the show a couple of times, so you know that it's always kind of a crapshoot. It's like, yes. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, no, it's not. I didn't turn the volume up. Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Abe Van Dam actually has a couple of new EPs out. Go check out his Bandcamp. Some really, really good stuff. He does the outro for our music. Abe, thank you very much for providing that extra, kind of, not really tribal, just that ancient history kind of techno. I like it. It's good. All right, my name is Chris George Zuger, and this has been the Den of Lore. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're watching this show, and I should have said this at the top of the program, David Roll is coming back on the show for another Sunday extravaganza. We're doing part 2 of our Grail mythos. We're doing the Spanish mythos. So you can come check that out. Check it out on Patreon. At patreon.com/Den of Lore. Sign up for the $5 or more package if you want to be able to get up to date on when new stuff comes out, news and such. Now that I'm not sick, I can actually update it. And that'll be coming up soon. So next week or so. All right, ladies and gents, ciao, and have a good night.